The false self is the ego. The ego is the part of us that has come to believe that who I am is defined by these 6 things. Who I am is what I have. And so we spend a big hunk of our life attempting to get as much stuff as we possibly can. The Tao teaches something very different. Let go of everything you have. When I moved to Maui in 2005 full-time, I gave up everything that I owned. Everything. 20,000 books, all of my photographs, records of every description, furniture, all the things in the house, all my clothing, shoes. It was all donated to people who lived on underneath a bypass in Florida. And let go of all of it. So the ego teaches us you are what you have. The Tao teaches us let go of everything that you have. Do less and accomplish more. One of Lao Tzu's most famous observations was, I do nothing and leave nothing undone. My son has taken to becoming a spiritual Taoist. Every time I tell him to do something, he says, I do nothing. And I leave nothing undone. But there's much wisdom in that. I could go on into that. The second thing that the ego teaches us is that who I am is not only what I have, but who I am is what I do, what I accomplish. And so we spend a big hunk of our lives believing that the way that we become, quote, successful, happy, fulfilled, self-actualized, whatever it might be, is on the basis of what I accomplish, what my resume looks like, how many promotions I get. And so we send our children off to school and we ask them to learn to identify themselves on how much they get and what they accomplish. Your grades become more important than what it is that you are studying. What you own, what clothes you wear, what labels you have, and so on. And we become obsessed with this kind of absurdity. And this is the false self at work. The third thing that the ego teaches us is that I am what other people think of me. I am my reputation. So becoming obsessed with our reviews, what people think of us, other people's opinions, getting the approval of others. We talk about peer group approval needs and so on. I have 8 children that aren't concerned about those things. They were never raised with that kind of a mentality. The whole idea of trying to please other people was something that they consistently heard from their mother and myself, that this isn't important to us. We're not attached to that. And this kind of an attachment. So the Tao teaches us that what you think of me is none of my business. What the ego teaches us is that what you think of me is the most important thing that I have, and so I'll do whatever it is that I need to do in order to get you to agree with me, to like me, to approve of me, and so on. The fourth thing that the ego teaches us, this false self, is that who I am is separate from everyone else. And so we are raised in this world of the false self, which teaches us that we have to be in competition with everyone else. We have to defeat someone else. Being number one is the most important thing, and you see people doing this all the time at football games and and you'll see it when the Olympics come up, that the gold medal is more important than anything else, and you'll see people weeping and sobbing over this idea that I have to be better than somebody else in order to be fulfilled in my life. The fifth thing that the ego teaches us is that I am separate not only from everybody else, but that I am separate from what's missing in my life. The Tao teaches us that there is no place that God is not. If there is no place that God is not, then God must be in you. And if there is no place that God is not, then God must also be in all that I perceive to be missing from my life. And therefore, in order to become a manifester and to attract into my life what I want, I simply have to realign myself. I have to rejoin. I have to yoga myself to God. And the most egregious error of the ego is a belief system that says that who I am is separate from God, that God is something outside of me. We have not been raised to understand and believe that at our basic core, what Lao Tzu called our original nature, what we are is love. And all we have to do is be that and live that. There was a great Indian poet. His name was Rabindranath Tagore. And he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913 for a collection of poetry called the Gitanjali. And in that poem, that long poem, 90-some verses, one of those verses says this. He's speaking of the ego. He said, I went out alone on my way to my tryst. But who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company. That's a great poet, and that's a great piece of truth, that in order to get to this place I speak about, that Maslow spoke to me about and trained me to think about, called self-actualization, is that we have to stop evaluating who we are on the basis of those ego identifiers, and instead begin to see ourselves as divine love, as pieces of God. The Native Americans used to say that no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. And look at us. Look at what happened just down the road from here in Colorado a few days ago. What is it about us that we have to create instruments of death in order to feel good about ourselves? What is it about us that we have to destroy each other and be in competition with each other and even create things called weapons? It's why Lao Tzu left the place where he left in ancient China at the time of the Warring States. And a big part of the Tao, something like 31 verses out of the 81 verses, speak to the absurdity of having weapons and killing each other. He said that every death in battle should not be celebrated, but should be mourned, because it gives evidence that we have not reached this place and understand what T.S. Eliot was speaking, this place from which we originated, this place to which we shall return. From A Course in Miracles, I jotted this down the other day. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. A mind at war with itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is a part of you, for you must be as God created you. Let all this madness be undone for you, and return in peace to the remembrance of God, still shining in your quiet mind. Coming to know God It's not about discovering something that resides outside of you. It's about remembering what's inside of you and living from that place. I don't believe that God is interested in us loving God. I believe God is interested in us loving each other and figuring out a way to do this regardless. And it's why I pray so hard for the idea that we will have people, especially in this election year, who will stand up and have the balls to say, it's time to stop making these weapons of mass destruction.